Super excited to have y'all joining us today for our webinar, Stop Guessing and Fuel Your Company's Growth with Data. Really excited about this topic. It's something I'm passionate about. I am Seay Baker, and I am a fractional chief marketing officer and a marketing consultant. I'm also the owner of Creator's Edge and Creator's Edge Strategy, I should say, and that's an agency that provides consulting, market research, and marketing optimization audits for companies and organizations. I've got over 20 years of experience in marketing, communications, and public relations. I really developed a passion for data and market research when I got my accreditation in public relations when I was early in my career. They really emphasized how research and data is really important to develop strategic plans and to be able to have a baseline to measure how your campaigns are being successful or not and how to fine tune them to be more successful in the future. So I carried that love of research and data throughout my career. And then later in my career, I spent a couple of years as a market research analyst at USAA and took a deep dive into the subject. And after that, I realized that all of my years of experience in marketing and PR combined with that new research experience could be really powerful for companies. So now I'm really excited about just sharing that with other people and companies to help them be more successful today. So Ben, do you want to go ahead and introduce yourself?
Sure. Yeah, Michelle, thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here and talk about one of my favorite things, which is talking about numbers and how they connect and, essentially how we can use numbers to ultimately make better decisions. I'm the founder of Amplify. We started almost a decade ago, and we help build forecasts for businesses that connect the dots and show how they can stay on track to hit their goals sooner. So we really love coming alongside businesses and showing how the numbers that you're looking at today and the targets that you set for those metrics and those numbers shine a big headlight into the future and show if these are your goals out there, this is what we need to track, and here's the impact of things like price changes or adjustments to marketing metrics and a lot of things that we'll dive into today. But the origin of starting Amplify was, you can see I have guitars behind me. I was in the music industry for a while, but then I went and got an MBA and have a background in private equity. So started Amplify almost a decade ago out of some conversations that I was having with business owners in the due diligence process to really, you come alongside and show here's what the growth potential is. And some of these companies just said, we actually don't want to sell part of our business. We just need help looking at our numbers. Could we just meet with you every month? And that was the origin of branching out and starting Amplify. So I just want every business to know their numbers as well as they can and just have an imagination for what's possible.
All right, thank you for introducing yourself, Ben, and it was great to learn a little bit more about your history as well. I think this is a really exciting partnership to be able to do this webinar together since we both love data and are really excited about helping businesses and organizations get better control of it. So super excited to be here with you today. And so let's go ahead and dig into the presentation here now for everyone. So the first thing I wanted to talk about in my part of the presentation is just why get control of your data. It's really important on many different levels, but the main thing is if you can't measure it, then you can't improve it. So that's a quote by Lord Kelvin. I think it's very powerful. And there's a lot of benefits that you can get from getting control of your data, including identifying gaps and leaks where money's being wasted. You can find missed opportunities for building awareness, improving your sales. You can inform messaging strategy and measure your campaigns to improve the results, and also make better decisions on hiring, paying yourself, investing, expanding, etc. But one of the biggest reasons why you need to get control of your data as a business owner is to get the answers to the questions that are keeping you up at night. So those questions, whether you can hire more staff or how much should you spend on marketing, wondering, is your marketing agency really making a difference? Are they really getting the results they should? Are you paying them too much money for what the kind of results you're getting from them? You might be wondering if you can pay yourself more, which marketing channels you should be spending money on. Just all those questions like that keep you up at night. We're going to try to address how to get the answers to some of those with data in this session today. So one of the first things I like to do is just talk to everyone about which metrics that you should actually be tracking. So a few years back, I was working with a company and they didn't really have anything set up. They weren't really tracking metrics very well. And so I was able to basically create a chart, this metrics chart that really broke down like what everyone in the organization needs to see from a metric standpoint, because the reality is that what your board of directors wants to see or what the owner wants to see is very different from what your customer service representatives see or what your marketing leader wants to see. So created this massive chart. It's got like 88 metrics on it. And if you guys want a copy of it, let me know and I'll send it to you after the meeting. But the biggest thing, the important thing is that you really want to narrow it down by the position and level and only focus on a few metrics for each particular person. And make sure that all of those metrics that those people are using ladder up to the ultimate goal, which is the organization's ultimate goal. And then what I wanted to also point out on this slide here is that you want to make sure and keep vanity metrics in their place. So what's a vanity metric? Vanity metric is like one of those metrics that it's like followers for on LinkedIn or social media. Followers really don't matter that much in this day and age because of the algorithms and the way that they are set up to run these days. So you want to just make sure that you don't get too hung up on those vanity metrics. But the ultimate goal really with metrics is one thing, and that is usually money. So you can see that money obviously is like the ultimate goal for most organizations and companies. Now, I want to make a note that there are nonprofit organizations and there are certain businesses that are very mission minded. So in those cases, money might not be the ultimate goal. But the reality is that they have to have money to actually achieve that goal, right? So everybody, even nonprofits, require money to accomplish all the things that they want to do. So next, I wanted to just give y'all a moment to stop and think about your particular organization. And I've got a worksheet. I think that Ben is going to put it in the chat, and so that you guys can actually think about these questions during this presentation and think about what is your organization's ultimate goal? Which numbers do you need to start and track to achieve your goals? How will you go about finding and tracking those metrics? And then what are the 1 to 3 things you're going to start tracking this year? So it's great to go out and learn during a webinar, but if you don't like put it into practice what you learn, then what value does it give you? So this is a way for you to really put this information that you get today to use. All right, so generally, what we're going to cover today and the rest of the meeting is just I'm going to go over marketing and sales optimization metrics, like answers to the questions that we promoted this webinar about. Talk a little bit about marketing technologies, traditional and modern research methodologies, including some AI tools that are really promising and cool. And then, of course, Ben's going to talk about practical forecasting and show you a really cool tool that he uses as well in his business to help other companies. All right, so diving into the marketing questions, we are going to tackle all of these questions on this list here. How big should your marketing budget be? How much should we spend per lead? How much should I spend on each marketing channel? How can I close more sales? And are my customers happy enough to give me a referral? And if not, why are they churning? So right now, I'd like for you to think a little bit about what are the biggest questions that you have right now. And if you are comfortable with it, drop it in the chat so everyone can see what everyone else is struggling with. I did want to take a note here and say that the photographs in this presentation are actually my own photographs. When Ben and I practiced the presentation, I showed him these pictures and told him I was going to take them out, but he encouraged me to leave them in here. So you're going to get to see my photography in this. So I hope that you enjoy these pictures. All right, so these are the questions that Ben is going to talk about. I will probably save this in the essence of time until his portion of the meeting, and then he can go into these more in depth. All right, so let's dive into the marketing questions. So how much should we spend on marketing to achieve our goal? So the metric that you need to look at when you're trying to see how much money you should spend on your marketing is really the cost of customer acquisition. Really, that particular metric is going to help you to really like plan for the future. It's going to help you figure out like what you need to spend to meet your revenue goals. So the CAC is basically your total cost of marketing and sales divided by the number of customers acquired. And this is going to give you that number of how much it costs to acquire one customer. So once you know that cost to acquire one customer, then you're going to be able to plan for the future because you could say, okay, in Q4, we want to get 20 new customers, and we know that it's going to cost us $1,000 for each customer to acquire them. So with that, you will be able to say that, hey, we're going to have to spend, at least $20,000 to get these new customers. So that's a little bit of a simplistic explanation, but I think it generally gets the point across. But basically, it's going to help you to stop guessing and to plan ahead as far as how much you need to spend and make a better decision about your marketing budget. A few notes on the CAC is that you're going to want to reduce that cost as much as possible. Also, it is hard to calculate it early in the early days of a company. A lot of times you need to get some data, like if you're a startup, it's a little bit hard to calculate that. So you're going to want to get 6 months to a year of data of advertising, seeing what's working, what's not working. And then you'll be able to better tell what you're really going to need to generate each customer. I recommend that you redo the CAC like every 6 to 12 months and that you can get the data from CRMs. So you might have to pull a lot of this together manually. There's also an online calculator that you can use to calculate this. So I put the link on this screen, and then I think Ben is going to drop it into the chat if he hasn't already. All right. So the next question is, how much should you spend on a lead? So for this particular question, we will look at the metric, the lifetime customer value. Some people call it customer lifetime value, CLV, but basically it is the amount of money a customer will contribute to your company's profits for the lifetime of them being a customer. So it's going to give you that amount of money that you're going to make off of a customer for the whole time that they're a customer of your company. And it's really going to help you determine how much money a lead is worth because, for example, I was working with a company and we found out that we were spending $3,500 on a lead through Google Ads. And I was like, wow, that's a lot of money. But then when we looked at the lifetime value and we looked and saw how long that they were going to be a customer and how much money was going to be generated over the long term, we realized that it was actually totally worth it to spend that $3,500. Now, just a note, if your lifetime value is not thousands and thousands of dollars, you're going to need to have a much lower CAC to be able to make the math work. And then there is a CLV calculator that I put down here as well. I don't think I shared that one with Ben, but if you guys are interested in the CLV calculator link, just let me know after the meeting and I will send it to you. So there are some challenges with determining the lifetime value of a customer, and that is if you have a lot of product lines and different pricing models, then maybe you have multiple products and one customer uses them all, then it gets very complicated. But you can figure out general averages to help you to determine what that number is and to at least make a more educated decision than you could without it. And then one other note I wanted to mention was regarding a goal is that you really want to set a goal to have an LTV to CAC ratio of about 3 to 1. So that means that for every $3, every $1 that you spend, you're going to get $3 back. So that's an important metric to keep in mind. And it might be different for some companies and industries, but that's a good one to look at overall. All right, so next we are going to talk about which marketing channels are getting the best ROI. So for this particular one, I wanted to point out here on this slide that I was going to call it like which marketing channels are getting the best ROI or actually should be getting love, because here's my picture of the clouds over here to the left. And if you can see, there's a little heart on the clouds. So that's why I picked this picture for this particular metric. All right. So The way that you're going to figure this out is really you want to try to figure out what your return on investment is per channel so that you can compare all of those together. So you really want to find out like how many leads turned into sales from each channel. And that number can be helpful to compare to other channels as well. But really, the number that's super helpful to determine ROI is like how much revenue was generated from each channel compared to the ad spend and the management costs. So this is going to be really, really helpful. Again, like I realized with this one particular company that we were spending a lot of money on Google ads, but when we actually looked at what the revenue was that was generated from Google ads, it was just barely breaking even. So it was not even worth it. So just have to uncover this data so that you don't waste a lot of ad spend. As far as like pulling all these numbers together and tracking all this data, what you really need to do is you need to have all of your metrics flowing into a good CRM that has good reporting capabilities or potentially another type of dashboard. But if you have a good CRM like Salesforce, which I've set up for a company, a marketing dashboard, and we pulled in all the data from all these different sources. You can set up QR codes and UTMs to pull in the data and the source of the data, or the source of the lead, I should say, into the CRM. And that way you're able to have it all automated instead of having everything having to be calculated manually. One little note about that is that there is like challenges where you have traditional marketing, say conferences or billboards, and you're like, well, how do I keep track of that as being a source? And it is difficult, but there is a way to do it. And that's by using those QR codes to turn someone who's a lead, a physical lead, into a digital lead. And then also you can use UTM codes. It's a little string of code that goes at the end of the URL. And then that feeds into your CRM so that you can determine where that lead came from. And then I also wanted to talk just a little bit about multi-touch attribution because this trying to track the channel, the ROI per channel is not perfect for sure. And it gets a little bit complex because a lot of people, it's not simple in that they see one ad, they click on it, and then they become a customer. A lot of times they might see you at a conference, then they might get an email from you, they might read a blog article. So they have all these points of touch with your company. And so if you have a good CRM setup, they can track that multi-touch attribution. They can look at the first time the customer got in touch with you, it's a first touch. That might be like, say, a conference, and you entered that information into the CRM. And then what's the last touch that they got in touch with you, like before they became a customer? So a good CRM can help you to look at that complexity and either weight it by the first touch or the last touch, or there's certain models that are set up as well where it combines and gives weight to each one of those different types of touches. So anyway, it's not perfect, but it can at least give you a good idea about how people became aware of you and maybe what that last thing that they were using or engaged with before they actually became your customer. So super helpful information. All right. So the next question on the list is how can you increase your leads and sales? So the way to do that is really with improving your messaging. You want to answer questions like, what do my customers care about? Why do they care? What do they care about the most? And what messaging will resonate with them the best? And the way to get the answer to those questions is with research. So you're going to need to uncover things like customer pain points, the unique value proposition that your company offers, your product offers, your differentiation from the competitors, your differentiated value, which is a little bit different from just differentiation, but it's like what the actual value is to your customer of your being different. And then also the insights that you want to find are like the channels, like where are the customers, potential customers like hanging out? Some people call that a watering hole. So you can just kind of find out what are those channels? Where are they going to hang out? Do they like LinkedIn? Do they like Twitter? Do they go to conferences, etc.? But there's a number of methodologies for finding all of those insights out. And those include online tools like secondary research, going onto Google or looking at government data, studies that are already like surveys that have already been done. And then you can also do customer interviews. So I'm a huge fan of customer interviews because it really gets into the psychology of the customer and why they really care about the particular product and why they really need it. And then there's also surveys. So this is going to give you quantitative data where you can basically know the volume of people that actually care about an issue rather than just a few people like it or don't like it. You can actually get a volume of how many people like something or don't like it. And this will help you to direct your budget smartly to things that are going to get the most return on investment. And then you can get information right out of your CRM. And then also there's a lot of AI market research tools that are being developed right now as well. And you're going to take all of that and filter it into your pitch decks and your sales outreach messaging, ad campaigns, etc. So all right, so this slide, I really love this slide a lot, and I'm running a little short on time, but I'm going to try to just make the point really quickly on this one. But basically, this is a chart here where on the left here, these are the metrics that run down through your pipeline roughly, starting from brand awareness down all the way down to revenue and profit. But the point of this chart is that you can see that if you could make a 10% change in each one of these metrics on the left, on the current column there, you can make a massive difference. And the way that you can make that difference is by looking and doing research or data analysis at each point along this journey. And so on the right side of the chart, you can see all those different types of research and data that you can do to improve those metrics. And you can see that just by a 10% change in these metrics, each one of them, the revenue is almost doubled here. So all right, so the next question is, are my customers happy enough to stay and give you a good referral? And if not, why are they churning? So I'm going to cover this pretty fast because again, we're a little bit low on time, but really research and doing surveys can be a really strong way to get this information. It's Net Promoter Score. Will your customers refer you to others? You've got your customer satisfaction surveys that can be done at a point of service right after someone engages with your company, then they can take that customer satisfaction survey. Customer effort score, that's like how hard or easy is it to do business with you. And then you can also do a product satisfaction surveys as well. I've actually done this for a company, like all of these things in one survey, and we got some really helpful information, finding out that customers considered training was not adequate. And that was leading to their not being as satisfied as they could be. So then the company was able to develop a whole program to help people to be trained better when they onboarded with the company. All right, and then right here, we'll talk just really briefly about the North Star metric. So this is a single metric that your whole company can rally around to indicate if your company is succeeding or not. It acts like a guiding star for your team, helping them to prioritize their work to impact that metric. And it really helps to promote a data-driven culture. This is going to be different for every company. It just depends on what your particular product is and what you care about to come up with that metric. All right, so how to get the data. We will rush through this part here because it's Ben's turn to give his presentation. So these are just a bunch of resources that you can get the data from, whether it's qualitative or quantitative data. You can do it in-house, you can use consultancies. AI tools are getting very popular these days to be able to do that for a much more affordable price. These are a few of the AI tools that I recommend. I'm not going to discuss all of them in detail right now just because we're a little short on time, but I'd be happy to, if you guys want to connect with me, talk about each one of them in more in depth. But I am going to just jump into two tools that I'm really excited about really quickly here. This one is called Subconscious, and it is synthetic research respondents that are based on human research. And you can actually get like statistical data, like send out a survey to these synthetic respondents and get statistical data back on what features that they would care about most when you're going to be developing or marketing a product. So that's pretty cool. And you can look at price elasticity. Again, I won't get into a lot of the details of how this works, but it can tell you what prices would attract more people to your product and which price levels would actually detract from them purchasing your product. And then finally, my last one is just the Jenny project is pretty cool because you can actually look at slogans and find out which demographics might like a particular title for your webinar, for example, which is what I ran this particular study on. So Stop Guessing and Grow Your Company with Data was the winner by 68%. So, all right. So now we'll jump into Ben's turn here. So hope that was helpful for y'all. Ben, are you ready to go ahead and share your part of the presentation?
Rock and roll. Let's go.
Awesome.
You set us up so well, Michelle. That was awesome.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I love what you're saying. Even I'll go ahead and share my screen if that works.
Sure, yeah.
And I think it ties into Dennis asked a question that Dennis asked what the most common mistake companies make when they first try to shift from gut-based decision to data-driven ones. For me, what we see, and I'm going to show my visual here, is an invitation that Michelle just made was, hey, you got to track the numbers that are tied to where you're at in your business today and the things that influence what's going on. And then you also need to have this North Star metric and kind of understanding of what will actually get you to there out in the future, right? So the work we do is around, and I love that the title was guessing, because at the end of the day, what we want to help people do is stop guessing around how these numbers actually play out into the future. So Dennis, this red squiggly line, I think, speaks to what you were asking, which is a symptom or an outcome when you set kind of these lofty goals in the future and you try to start tracking things, but you never actually mathematically connect the two. And so what we really want to do is take things like customer acquisition cost, return on ad spend, marketing budget, like all these things. And I'll jump into a tool here that we use to map these out just so you can see the impact of having a rhythm in place and a process in place to actually monitor and follow over time to make sure that you're moving down the path on a dotted line like this, as opposed to just, I hope we're moving in the right direction, let's cross our fingers. So what we see all the time is businesses setting those two targets in isolation. And we're big fans of EOS. If anybody's familiar with EOS, that's the language here. You see scorecard and VTO. VTO stands for Vision Traction Organizer, but it's basically, what are we doing today? What are we trying to do in the future? What we see all the time is that businesses are making their best effort guess at what the right revenue target or profit target is and what the right things to track and targets to set. So what I wanted to show essentially is how we look at taking those individual metrics and tying them together with different formulas to give us the ability to zoom out, step back, and see. I'll walk through what you're seeing here so you don't have to interpret this on your own right now, but to be able to step back and see the impact of just one change within the metrics. And so what you're seeing here, just I'll pop the hood here in a moment, but what you're seeing here is the impact of future revenue and future cash on hand for, this is a demo business that we made, but it's showing the impact of a lower acquisition cost versus a higher acquisition cost in comparison to this blue line, which is what we expect the acquisition cost to be. So this is just a visual. You'll see here how we got to this, but this tool that we use is called Fathom. It's different than the note taker Fathom that a lot of people are familiar with, but it connects right up to accounting data, and it gives the ability to just create these different line item formulas that we can basically say, okay, we think we know what we're supposed to be tracking. Let's just make sure we understand what happens if, for instance, and you see these, I'm going to just focus really on this marketing metric section up here because this contains customer acquisition costs. So for a business who's running any marketing campaigns, you have to make a decision on how much are we going to spend on marketing. So let's say in this case, we're spending $17,500 on marketing. okay, well, what's the acquisition cost that we would anticipate? This is a hot sauce subscription model. So I love hot sauce. If anybody else loves hot sauce out there. But basically, in this demonstration, we have a $17,500 marketing budget, and then we're going to apply that $9 per acquisition of a new customer. And so if we just follow these numbers real quick, then that gives us an estimated new number of subscribers to be that total marketing budget divided by our acquisition costs. And what that allows us to then do is add those new subscribers to the existing subscribers and even apply a churn percentage of the subscribers who fell off from last month to this month, and give us the ability to really get to a point where we can have an estimated number of, here's the balance of subscribers we have each month over month heading into the future. And this is really helpful because even just combining two different variables that we don't necessarily have a lot of control over, we can influence, but two variables I want to highlight are what is the actual acquisition cost of each customer, and then how many customers are we losing from month to month. And so the power of having a tool like this Fathom platform, and I have a discount code if anybody wants to sign up. I don't get anything from it except I have the peace of mind that one more business is looking at their numbers in a meaningful way. But what we have is the ability to take a baseline estimate here of the number of subscribers, and then we can duplicate this and say, okay, we've got a baseline model. Let's now push it different directions. So instead of having to just try in real time what would happen if something were to change in our acquisition cost and learn in real time, I guess is a better way to say it, we can actually create different storylines. I heard somebody describe this when I was showing them this. It's almost like a metaverse. This is like a simulation almost of different storylines of how the business could play out into the future. So what I want to highlight here is by switching to a different scenario over here, you'll see the acquisition cost. When I click this, the acquisition cost is going to go up from 9 up to 15. And if you were watching this in subscriber number, you will have noticed that it definitely dropped pretty significantly, because what's happening here is we're spending the same amount each month on marketing, but it's less efficient. We're not bringing in as many new customers as we'd like. On the flip side, we can also create a scenario that says, well, what if it's more affordable than we expect? So instead of $9 per acquisition, what if it ends up being only $5? And again, you see this major push in a positive direction, because all of a sudden that same number of dollars that we're deploying out into the marketing world is bringing more customers for that same investment. So all that we're doing over in this report section is showing, okay, this is the $9, blue is the $9 expectation. And if we're able to achieve a better customer acquisition cost, or what happens if we have a worse acquisition cost, this is the impact of how revenue will play out. Now, one thing that is really helpful in looking at this is what it can feel like when you're talking about numbers and trying to forecast. It feels like everything is possible and it could be to the moon, or it could just fall apart. The range feels too big when you're looking out into the future about how something like revenue might play out. So what we see is that there's a lot of peace of mind that comes from just taking a ceiling and floor estimation of how good or how bad a single metric like customer acquisition cost might be in future months, and then actually incorporate that into the broader forecast model and understand that chances are it's not going to be better, it's not going to be worse than these two pictures. But that's helpful because we can at least see, for instance, even in the worst scenario, that we are still in business. We're still doing fine moving out into the future when we look ahead at the cash on hand balance in future months. So what we do with the numbers, everything Michelle was talking about around the metrics that are worth tracking and paying attention to, what's really helpful is to understand for your industry specifically what an expected acquisition cost might be, because you don't want to compare your business to a totally different type of business or different industry, because that can be frustrating and confusing. So what we find to be really important to do is to go from scratch, treat each business as being as unique as each human being is. The whoever founded it, each business is going to be just as unique, and it's not going to be exactly like, even if it's a similar type of business, it's not going to always be exactly the same. And so what we find to be really important is to, from the ground up, build a model using a tool like Fathom. You can use spreadsheets if you like, but something that allows you to begin to answer some of these types of questions. Because at the end of the day, we're not in business because we love numbers. We're looking at numbers because we want to see our business flourish and thrive and grow in a way that allows us to set out and accomplish what we envision when you started your business. So the goal is not to just create a giant pool of numbers to dive into and swim around. The goal is to say, hey, how can we use numbers to really understand what's going on in the business and learn how we can actually create growth plans that allow us to track and monitor whether or not we're on track as we grow. And so once you get a baseline model in place, there are more lines here and more scenarios that I wanted to just highlight real quick, where you can also include things like I mentioned churn earlier. A confusing thing sometimes is, what happens if I raise my prices? Am I going to lose customers? How many customers could I afford to lose, but still be in a good spot money-wise? Especially if you're overrun with demand, or you see competitors pricing their lesser quality products or services at a higher price than even you are. You can see indicators sometimes of it might be time to raise prices. So what we are able to do using a tool like this is we can, in this scenario, the two gold lines at the top are aimed at answering the question of, okay, we've got this blue baseline path that we're on. What happens if we raise prices? And in raising prices, we keep all of the customers that we have. Well, that's the best scenario of all, right? It's same number of customers, but we're charging more. So our revenue and profit are both going to go in a really positive direction. But what happens if we, in raising prices, we lose more customers through churn? So price goes up, churn also goes up. What is that picture? And so what I want to highlight here that is just, proof to me that it's too complicated to just answer that question in your head or navigate it just on the back of a napkin. This slightly lighter gold line is the revenue picture of if you raise prices, but also lose more customers. And so you can see, oh, not great necessarily. We're going to, our revenue might be down. But importantly, if we look down at the next graph, this is our cash on hand position over time. And what I want to highlight is just the unique combination of, hey, you are charging more per unit and you may be generating less top line revenue, but importantly, the bottom line is in a good spot. You're actually in a better cash position by moving this direction where you're okay with losing a few more customers along the way. And the important thing with that is you might find that things are so chaotic and you're overrun, and you got to just figure out how to calm the operations down. And one lever that can be pulled to do that is by increasing price. And so the real helpful question sometimes is also, how many customers could we afford to lose if we raise our prices 10% and still be in at least as good of a cash position if we just continued on the trajectory we're on? The important thing too is once you set the forecasted plan, there's a whole function that we're not even going to get to around when can we afford to make certain hiring decisions or layer on new capital expenditure things. But I'm happy to connect and talk through these features as well. But one thing that we see a lot of times that is a missed opportunity is using the profit and loss statement as a recalibration tool each month. So once you decide what combination of acquisition costs, marketing spend, all these metrics, you decide on the data that you really want to aim at as the key drivers of your revenue and profitability for your business, you can create this is the roadmap we want to follow. This is where we want to kind of compare ourselves to each month. If you don't have a good way of interacting with the numbers each month when the financials close out, you're missing a huge opportunity. And it's totally normal and totally fine if you do this. But I know a lot of business owners don't even open their financial statements when their bookkeeper or accountant sends it to them each month, just because it's not always clear what to look for. It's a little bit confusing and overwhelming. And so What we have developed is a simple framework that we call a map review. So we've got this vision of where we want to be going in the big picture from a growth standpoint. We have created a model that connects. We're pretty confident, like we've set this revenue or profit target out in the future that we know is realistic. Dennis, coming back to your original question, we know is realistic based on the inputs that we think are possible from acquisition costs and marketing spend, all that stuff. So we have a connected path. And so that all of a sudden is the journey that we can compare ourselves to month after month and gauge whether or not we're on track. So we're going to be able to monitor by looking at things like the expected revenue. Did we spend as much on marketing and advertising as we thought? Were our margins where we expected them to be? So is our net income in a good spot? Also, things like, here's a graph where we're able to include things like non-financial metrics right alongside financial data, where we're able to monitor things like the customer acquisition cost versus a target that we anticipate. So I just can't emphasize enough the importance of monitoring and paying attention to, and not being afraid to actually look at the numbers each month as the journey continues, because it's really the only way that we can test and refine and make adjustments and get away from guessing. At the end of the day, if you're alone in guessing, like, I feel for you. Happy to show you some of these other areas around like big decision making and around hires and investing in a new building, new decisions around launching products, like all these things. At the end of the day, again, I still haven't met anybody who started their business because they love trying to answer these complicated questions around data and using spreadsheets or whatever tools are available. We just want to, as much as we can, narrow the region of darkness as you're looking ahead into the future months and years, because any business owner has worked too hard to just cross your fingers and hope that you continue down the right path. And what we see on the flip side is when you don't have a plan, you're either guessing or you're just playing it really safe and just trying to repeat what you did last month that didn't cause the business to fall apart. And so there's a third option that is creating an intentional kind of plan that ties all these numbers together in a way that allows you to know that you're actually on track.
We'll dive in here and answer a couple of questions. And then I've got a QR code that I can share with you and our contact information at the end of the webinar so that you can access us and contact us if you have more questions later. So as far as Dennis, your question, I wanted to go ahead and answer that, and then feel free to jump into if you have anything to add. But one of the questions that Dennis had was like, what is one of the most common mistakes that companies make when they're first trying to shift from a gut-based decision to data-driven ones? And I would say there's a couple that come to mind for me. One of those would be that they try to look at too many metrics. They really need to narrow it down to really the key ones that are going to help them understand whether they're moving in the right direction or not. So that's one thing. And then also, a lot of companies will shift into using, say, a tool like Salesforce or another CRM, and they get it set up, but then they don't have any kind of system to actually help their employees learn how to use it very well or to adopt it. Maybe they train them like one training, here's how to use the CRM, but then they don't really keep up with that and make sure that everyone's filling in the data. And so the reality is that all of your reporting that you set up in your CRMs, like the dashboards, all the data that might flow into a tool like Ben's Fathom, if you don't have the correct data entered by your employees or automatically going into it, then you're not going to get good data to make good decisions on. So that adoption by the staff is huge to make sure that you have a program in place to weekly, monthly remind people, are you entering in the information or are you being complete about it? Also, I've seen companies not enter in the revenue. And so they might have the CRM and everything set up, but there's no revenue. So they're not actually tracking the data from, the source of the lead at the very top at the awareness all the way down to the actual like expected revenue and whatever revenue closed when a sales team member actually closed a sale. So you need to make sure and have all of that data. So do you have anything to add to that, Ben, or are we good?
No, other than just, I agree with the temptation to track too many things, because it's almost like going into a grocery store or something and you fill your cart with the first aisle of things and because you're like, everything looks important. I think I need everything, but it's just not helpful if you try to look at too many things. I've always said, if you measure everything, you measure nothing. Like, you really have to make sure that there's a reason why each number shows up. And there are good resources now, even with prompting ChatGPT or something, to just say, hey, here's my type of business industry. What are the top 3 metrics that I should be tracking? Like, it's a good place to start, just because otherwise, you might hear a podcast from somebody, or you might see somebody on YouTube or a webinar like this even that says here's the formula, the magic formula. And really what we're saying is the good news and the reality is it depends for your business. But at the end of the day, what Michelle and I are both saying, I think, I don't want to speak for you, Michelle, but is it's worth digging in to figure it out. Because if you can understand which metrics really play into your business, you have the ability to ask better questions and find better answers as a result of it. And when you do reach out for someone else's help to pull the numbers together, you're engaged with it. You're not just going, I don't know, that seems like a different language to me. I'm just going to trust them. And the reality is, some of the best storytellers I've ever met are marketing agencies who have a new story every month as to why the dollars weren't as efficient as we thought they were going to be, right? So there's just a reality of the numbers being embraced and bought into and understood by everyone, so that you can just have a really powerful conversation and relationship with the numbers.
Yeah. That's great, Ben. I really appreciate that. I think it's important to also make sure that you are reviewing the data on a regular basis. And I think that a lot of times people will set up tools and they'll get trackers and do these things, but then life gets busy and they don't take the time to actually review them. So I think both you and I both offer things where we review the data and then meet with the business owner like once a month to, okay, here's what's happening with your metrics. And having a touch point, a meeting monthly can help you to keep track, like what's going on. It gives you that point in time to make sure that you are addressing those important data points along the way. So I really very much encourage that for everyone to at least even set yourself a meeting once a month. I'm going to review the data. But I would also say that it's really important to, on certain metrics, you're going to want to look at them more frequently. Like when you launch a new ad campaign, you're really going to want to keep a close eye on that. But then other ones, you want to also look at more trended data. So you might need to look at 3 months of data to be able to tell whether you're making progress in an area, because sometimes things will be up and down in the short term, but over the long term, you're going to see that it's trending up or down. And so you need to both look at it short term and look at it long term as well. So do we have any other questions in the chat here, or the Q&A?
Yeah, I see Dennis said for some reason my messages and attachments weren't going out to everybody, maybe. So I think Michelle's probably going to send a follow-up email. I'll include a couple links that she can send as well, that for anyone interested to check out everything that we've been talking about. So
Okay. Yeah, I think as far as tools go, there's a lot of great tools to analyze CAC and CLV and all of that, and business performance. And so, Ben, you mentioned Fathom. That's the tool that you use, which is a
yep.
great tool. There's another tool called Clipfolio that you can pull in a lot of data into. But if you have a good CRM too, that's like just the basic foundation that everybody should have. If you get like something like Salesforce, it's like super expensive. But there's other ones like HubSpot, and High Level is really affordable. That's actually the one that I'm using now. And it has those reporting capabilities and abilities to track your lead sources and all of that. So, but yeah, feel free to reach out. I guess we're getting close to the end here. But any of y'all, just feel free to reach out to Ben and I. Our contact information is on the screen there, and connect with us on LinkedIn. If you'd like to, again, get a copy of my Who Cares metrics chart, just you can scan that and fill out the form that's on my website to get a copy of that. And really, I'd be happy to collaborate with y'all on anything that you'd like to discuss. If you want to set up a meeting to just do a no charge, a metrics review of what's going on with your particular organization. So I think that's all the questions that we've got. Anything else, Ben, that you'd like to add before we wrap this up?
Nope, I just realized my email address is amplify.business. If anybody wants to reach out to me, it's not .com on the screen. I probably passed along the wrong one, but Ben at amplify.business. So
Awesome. All right.
great. Thank you, Michelle.
Yeah, thank you, Ben, for joining us. A really great presentation. Learning more about Fathom was fascinating, and it's just so powerful what people can do when they have that kind of foresight and just they can make better decisions faster with all of these tracking all of these metrics that I mentioned, and then by using tools like you have, it's really all about just getting that peace of mind, making better decisions faster. So glad y'all could join us, and again, feel free to reach out if you have any other questions. Thanks.
Thank you.
Bye.